Let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to Customizing Reports in QuickBooks Enterprise. And this session is brought to you by the Intuit Premier Reseller Program and is presented by one of the resellers, yours truly, Hector Garcia. There's my email on the screen. Take a picture of that, write that down. I'm really good at answering questions to my colleagues about QuickBooks, especially with QuickBooks reports and that sort of thing. About me, I work and live in the Miami, Florida area. I have an integrated technology consulting practice that mostly revolves around QuickBooks, QuickBooks training, QuickBooks consulting, QuickBooks sales, integration. If it has to do with QuickBooks, I'm probably doing it. I'm an advanced QuickBooks Pro advisor and a premier Intuit reseller, and there's my email. Again, if you want to contact me, I am very reachable via email. Okay, so table of contents, we'll spend about 5 minutes talking about why QuickBooks Enterprise specifically and not QuickBooks Pro Premier on the reports area. We're going to focus mostly on the reports. We'll spend about 5 minutes talking about other important highlights about QuickBooks Enterprise versus Pro and Premier because our focus is QuickBooks Enterprise. We'll talk about how QuickBooks Enterprise gets purchased. It's very different than QuickBooks Pro Premier and online, so I'd like to make a quick discussion about that. Then I'll talk about 3 specific reports that only QuickBooks Enterprise has, which are the WIP, the work in progress summary, committed costs, and inventory stock status reorder report. So I'll talk about these specific reports that you can only find in QuickBooks Enterprise. And then we'll spend about 30 minutes talking about customizing reports in QuickBooks generally. And we'll leave about 5 minutes for Q&A. I hope that should be an hour. Perfect. So let's talk about why QuickBooks Enterprise. And I'm only going to be focusing on reports. And it's really important to pay attention to this, although this is not the demo portion of it. I know most people wait for the demo. This piece of information is really, really important to know when planning to choose QuickBooks Pro, Premier, or Enterprise, specifically when thinking about reports. And sometimes you have to think a couple of steps ahead of time in order to think about reports before you think about the data entry piece. But QuickBooks Enterprise has 10 name fields and 15 item fields on custom fields. That means that when I create an invoice, for example, I have up to 10 header fields that I have on the top part of the invoice in which I can enter any specific piece of information, conditions of the sale, type of the sale, maybe the country that I'm shipping to, maybe the country that I'm shipping from, maybe the type of product, the total weight of the product. There's so many things and very customizable, of course, that you can put in there. And then you can use that information in reports to filter and create very customized reports that you couldn't otherwise do with other software. Now, QuickBooks Pro and Premier give you 5 name fields and 7 item fields, where Enterprise gives you double, right? So that's one little plus for Enterprise. The other piece is in these custom fields, you can restrict the data and type format of those custom fields. In other words, you can create a custom drop-down menu where the user can only select the data from that drop-down menu, so reduces on data entry errors, right? Garbage in, garbage out, of course. And also you can restrict to say, look, in this field, you can only put numbers. In this field, you can only put dates, right? Depending on the type of information that you're recording on that field. The other great feature that QuickBooks Enterprise has that QuickBooks Pro Premier do not is that you have a report combiner built-in feature where you can take multiple QuickBooks files and combine them into one Excel document that shows you a profit and loss and a balance sheet by company. And that's all built into the software, something that Pro Premier doesn't have. Some of the really more advanced functions is there's a ODBC driver built in to QuickBooks Enterprise that allows other software like Excel, Access, SQL to pull data from QuickBooks so you can do other things outside of QuickBooks. And there's also a special feature called QBar, or otherwise known as QBar, which is built into the QuickBooks Enterprise subscription. And that's called QuickBooks Advanced Reporting, which really allows you to do some highly programmable custom reports. And then, of course, there's a specific list of QuickBooks Enterprise-only reports. Now, in this slide, this is the list of all the Enterprise-only reports. The ones on the right side that are in red, they're on the Platinum version of QuickBooks Enterprise only. I'll talk about the versions in a second. Things that have to do with multiple inventory sites, lot numbers, serial numbers, and FIFO, right, which are things that are only available in QuickBooks Enterprise Platinum. Those are all on the right side. Those reports are only available in Enterprise Platinum. On the left side, you're going to see the first two, which is a job WIP summary and the committed cost by job, which is mostly for construction companies, for contractors. Those two reports are only available in Enterprise, all versions of Enterprise. And then you have a really awesome feature they added last year, which is a negative inventory listing, which gives you a report of just the items you have in negative inventory. And if you are an accountant or a consultant in the QuickBooks world dealing with clients that have inventory, you know that negative inventory is a thing, and it's also a highly destructive thing for the books, for the accounting, cost of goods sold, inventory valuation. All that stuff gets really messed up when you have negative inventory. So that report really helps you figure out which items are causing problems. There's also a new inventory assembly shortage report, which basically lets you know if you're trying to assemble or create an assembly. It lets you know what you're short on, so you can just order that. And there's also an inventory stock reorder report, which is an inventory stock status report with a reordering feature, which I will show you as well. The other highlights of QuickBooks Enterprise particularly is that you can have up to 30 users versus a limitation of 3 on Pro, limitation of 5 on Premier. You can define user permissions and access restrictions on QuickBooks Enterprise. It can handle more than 14,500 items, customers, vendors, which is a hard line restriction of QuickBooks Pro and Premier. There's a feature that updates the sales price when costs are changed if you have a fixed margin or markup set, which is actually pretty amazing for wholesalers, inventory type of companies. It also has a setting that will prevent the user, not just a warning, it will actually literally not let the user create a transaction that creates a negative inventory. And I tell you, that has been life-changing for some of my clients in the past couple of years. It is kind of a nuance, but it forces them to do the right procedure, receiving the product before they sell it. Enterprise also has a special platinum subscription that has advanced inventory that can do FIFO inventory valuation versus average cost, which is how Pro Premier work at the moment. Multiple inventory site support. It can do serial or lot number tracking. You can also do advanced pricing rules based on multiple conditions, and you can set volume discounts on items. There's another awesome feature which is actually highly related to reports, which is the default class report, which you can set a default class per account item or name. So that way, when the user selects that account item or name, it automatically gives you the class that is supposed to go. And that really reduces on the data entry errors of folks that forget to put a class on a transaction. That makes it difficult for us to produce a specific class-based report. It also has an advanced item search within the forms, the estimate, sales order, invoice, purchase order forms. So for folks that have large item lists, it's actually absolutely crucial. It can show the item cost in the list price or the list cost of the item in the forms, which is very useful for some salespeople. It can open 2 company files simultaneously, which is also available on the accountant edition. And it has US-based support. It's actually included with the subscription. Okay, let me check the box here if there's any questions. And for some reason, my screens are delaying. Spelling these things on the slides would make it look more professional, wouldn't it? Okay, so there's some resources on the screen here, so I don't want to get too much into it, but I have a specific chart. If you click on that first link, that actually compares feature by feature and tells you whether it's on QuickBooks Online or Pro and Premier. There's an article that I wrote for Intuit about why upgrading to QuickBooks Enterprise, and I go more in depth into those features, and then a 1-hour video where I pretty much explain, what the advantages of Enterprise are over Pro and Premier. Okay, so I wanted to cover real quick, but I'm not going to for the sake of time, but I wanted to cover real quick how QuickBooks Enterprise is purchased. And what I'll just kind of show you real quick is that you can buy between 1 to 10 users or 30 users. There's 4 versions depending on the features that you want. It's only subscription based, typically annual subscription based. There's no option to buy a one-time software the way it is with. Let me do the screenshot here, the slideshow. That's not full screen, so it doesn't get so delayed. Yeah, there you go. And there's also an option to bundle it with hosting services. In the slides, there's a price sheet that kind of gives you an idea more or less what the MSRP pricing is. There's always discounts. There's always special promotions. They update every month. So if you want the price sheet every month, just email me, and I'll go ahead and send you that price sheet anytime you want to. The retail price sheet, the discount price sheet, and also how much commission resellers get on the process, which I actually share with accounting professionals. So if you want to partner with me directly to purchase QuickBooks Enterprise for yourself or your client, email me or call me. All my information is there. Or if you want to become a reseller, I give you the contact information of my contact person in Intuit directly. So let's jump right into the enterprise reporting demo. And we're going to talk about these 3 reports that are only available in QuickBooks Enterprise. So we're going to start with the WIP, the Work in Progress report, which is one of my favorite reports in the QuickBooks world. And that's going to be on the reports, jobs time and mileage, and job WIP summary or job work in progress summary. And I'm going to explain to you how this report works. So the way this report works is it will take and we'll focus on just one job here. So I'm going to zoom in on this job here for $200,000. So we're going to look at this job here for $200,000, and it basically will take the estimated cost, which is going to be a function of the information that's inside of the estimate. So I'll show you how that works. It takes the actual cost and then divides the actual cost by the estimated cost and figures out the percentage completed. Then with that percentage completed, 9.86, it will multiply it times the estimated revenue, which is the information on the estimate that you want to receive. And it tells you the earned revenue, which is that multiplication of the percentage of completion versus and what you've actually charged so far, and it gives you the difference. So if you do any construction accounting, you know that you had to construct this in QuickBooks in Excel manually to figure out how much you're overbilling or underbilling. This report gives you automatically exactly what you're underbilling and overbilling. So how this information gets constructed? Well, when you create an estimate for the first time, and I'm pulling up the estimate at the moment, you're going to have a place in the estimate where you can put your estimated cost for the project and how much you plan to make on it and the sales price. So the 275 is your estimated revenue. The 200 is your estimated cost. Now, where this information comes from, actual cost, I'll show you. These are, any charges that you do on it. Like, for example, let's say you charged a journal entry against it because you made an adjustment, or maybe I'll give you a more practical example. Maybe we had a vendor that we paid. So just take a look at this $19,000 here, and I'll go ahead and just write a check to a vendor and show you how writing that check to a vendor will make that actual cost go up as long as I select the customer's name in the actual check that I use. So I'm going to go into banking, write check, and then I'll select any vendor here at random. I'll pick this vendor, and let's say this vendor is charging us $20,000, and we're going to charge that $20,000 against that customer job. Okay, so as long as I just create any expense and I select any account category and I select the customer job here, as long as that piece of information is being created, you're going to have the work in progress report keep track of all the expenses that are being job costed, and it will consistently change that percentage of completion and tell you what your earned revenue is versus your estimated revenue, and keep track of the difference, again, to see if you're overbilling or underbilling. Again, if you are somebody working with construction companies, then you definitely know what this is. And this is actually an extremely important piece. Now, if you don't have, and just want to make sure I mention that, if you don't have Enterprise and you have Pro and Premier, the closest thing to that is a report here called Estimates versus Actual Summary. That does give you most of the information. So it does give you estimated cost, estimated revenue, or actual revenue versus estimated revenue, but it doesn't give you the percentage of completion and what your revenue should be to figure out that difference. So that extra little feature, it's only available in Enterprise. Another really important feature, especially for contractors, construction companies, is a report called Committed Costs by Job, right here, Committed Cost by Job, under the Reports menu, under Jobs, Time, and Mileage. So Committed Cost by Job, what it will do is it will take non-posting information, such as information from timesheets and purchase orders, and add them to your committed costs. So you can both calculate your real costs that you put in QuickBooks, things that come from checks and bills, and costs that are about to happen. So for example, this $3,900 worth of committed costs, these are going to come from a purchase order, right? So as long as you have a purchase order and it's being job costed, that means that we have selected the customer job down here. This 3948 is going to transfer over to my committed cost report. So I know that I'm projecting to have, so it's not just what I've actually spent, it's also what I'm projecting to spend. And this is a question I get from a lot of my clients, that they want to see the stuff that they haven't spent yet on the job costing report. But QuickBooks cannot mix non-posting with posting information, with the exception of this report called a committed cost report. Same thing would happen with right here, unpaid wages. So if I were to create a timesheet, so I'll create a weekly timesheet, pick one of my employees here, and I'll select the job, and we'll select here we'll make him our installation labor employee. We'll put 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. Whatever effect of payroll this is going to have, whatever the cost of this employee is, times those 32 hours, are now going to transfer into that committed cost report. There's another really important client base for QuickBooks Enterprise, which does a lot of inventory management. There's a report here called Inventory Stock Status by Item, which this exact same report is available in QuickBooks Pro and Premier. So the report itself is not different. What is different is this little checkbox up here that says Create Auto POs. And what Create Auto POs does is that it takes every line item of your report and notices when you have a little check mark here that says order. For a very long time, if you've been using QuickBooks Pro Premier, you got a little check mark that says order. It never really done anything. Now they've actually done something with it. So what they've done with that order is that whatever is your minimum, right? So for example, it says that this item here, the CODR cordless drill at 100 minimum, I only have 3. Therefore, it's saying that you definitely should order some, right? So the reorder quantity to get you back in stock would be what will be created automatically with this Create Auto POs. So when I click on Create Auto POs, and it shows me every single item that I'm short on, all I have to do is click on the one that I do want to order, and notice that automatically the quantity to order will fill on the right side right there with 97. And based on whoever the vendor is, if there already is a preferred vendor, it will add the preferred vendor there, or it'll give you the option for you to choose which your preferred vendor is. And you can actually choose whichever one you want to automatically create a purchase order for, even if it's multiple vendors. You click down here where it says Create POs on the bottom of the screen, and you will notice that QuickBooks will actually create 3 purchase orders for us, right? And based on the vendor. So you'll notice here that you have all the purchase orders being created. All I have to do is double click on whichever one I want to see. And then we see a purchase order that was automatically created. In the memo down here, it says auto created. So you know that it was created by QuickBooks automatically using that function. So again, that stock status by item report is actually available on Pro, Premier, Accountant, Enterprise, all the editions, but that little button that says automatically create PO is not. Okay, let's do a quick polling question while we switch gears. It's just wondering whether or not you're already part of the Pro Advisor program, or if you are recommending QuickBooks Enterprise to your clients at the moment. So just answer. There's no right or wrong answer. Just answer that so we can have information about that. You can have your polling question for your CPE. Okay, while this happens, let me look at some of these questions. So Dallin, and I'm sorry if I butcher your name, I'm going to read your question. When you are having purchases direct shipped and you need to bill the customer for before they ship, you end up being negative inventory, which you mentioned it causes a problem. How do you avoid this problem? Okay, so Dallin's saying that what ends up happening is that most QuickBooks users want to create an invoice before they receive the inventory with a bill. But because it's a direct shipment, they don't actually create the bill. So, Dallin, the solution to that is you have to make sure that you have the discipline that before you create the invoice, you actually receive that purchase order into a bill before, to avoid that negative inventory. So that is just a matter of having the discipline to create the bill before the invoice. There's actually no other way to go around it. Now, if you do turn on the feature in QuickBooks Enterprise that prevents the negative inventory, the user will actually not be able to create the invoice. QuickBooks will stop them from creating the invoice, and it'll force them to have to take some action in order to create that invoice in the future to avoid the negative inventory. So, Dallin, hopefully that answered your question. Narish is saying, why is Intuit QuickBooks prices higher than the market? Not sure what that means. I mean, there's only one price typically, and there's an MSRP price, and then there's a discount that most resellers can offer. But there's actually no real competition on the QuickBooks Enterprise world. It's pretty much fixed pricing. So hopefully that answers your question. And Teresa is saying, a client of mine purchases uses saddles and then obviously sells them. Okay, his enterprise users have an average inventory cost to record after the sale. How can this be changed to have the exact purchased recorded on the cost of goods sold? So, Teresa, in order to get exact cost into cost of goods sold, you would have to have actually different items altogether. You would have to have a unique items for every single separate sale to be able to tie a direct expenditure from an item into a sale. There's no way to tie one purchase with one sale if you're using an inventory part and that inventory part is being used in multiple purchase sale scenarios. QuickBooks will always do average cost unless you're working with QuickBooks Enterprise and you turn on FIFO, and then it can do first in, first out basis. Jason says, are there any custom reports for law firms you would recommend for QuickBooks Desktop? So Jason, there is one custom report. I'm not sure if I have time to cover it, but usually for law firms, the most common question I have is setting up a custom report that gives them all the balances by case or by customer whenever they have money in their trust account. So there is a custom report you can build. If you got the correct information recorded in the data entry, you can do that with some of the custom reports. So I'll allude to it when I'm covering it while I'm doing it. Okay, so let's move on to customizing reports in QuickBooks. So what I'm about to show you from this point forward is actually not exclusive to QuickBooks Enterprise. This would actually work in all versions of QuickBooks: QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Premier, QuickBooks Accountant, and QuickBooks Enterprise. Obviously not QuickBooks Online. Everything I'm going to show you is based on the entire version, on the entire options that QuickBooks gives you on the desktop side. Why? Because the reporting system in QuickBooks Enterprise versus desktop is actually identical. The only difference is those 3 reports I showed you earlier, and all that list of reports that have to do with advanced inventory, that's only in Enterprise, and also the custom fields, which if I have time, I'll cover that. But let's go over these because this is actually the meat and potatoes of the presentation. So the single most important thing that I think at any point you want to learn in order to know how to create custom reports, if you need to identify what is the source and what is the destination. So what is the source and what is the destination? You also want, if you hear the word header or summary, that's interchangeable with this concept of source. And if you hear the word detail, split, distribution, or line item, that's all going to be similar to this concept of destination. Now, every transaction is going to have a source. Now, the source is not always a debit or not always a credit, but the source is like sort of where the money is coming from. Let's just call it that. So if you have a check, the source would be the bank account where the money is coming from, and it will be the perspective of that transaction from the bank account perspective. Now, the destination would actually be the expense category in the case of a check. So it will be what the transaction looks like from the perspective of the expense category. So in a check, everything above that expenses and item tab, it's all information that's on the source, and anything below that is information that's on the destination. Now, one thing that's really important for you to know, some information from the source copies into destination, and some information from destinations copies into the source. The golden rule to that is if there's a conflicting field in the destination side, when you pull a detailed report, you're going to see the destination piece. But if the field doesn't exist on the destination or split side, it will carry over the information from the source part. So for example, if I pull a report that shows detailed destination information, such as the expense categories on a check, and I ask for a check number, that check number is actually not in the destination, but because there's no field on the destination for a check number, it will carry that information over. Same thing with the total date. The amount, for example, is different. In this case, the amount will conflict because in this particular check, you have two destinations, you have two split expense categories, one for 200, one for 300. Therefore, if I'm looking at a source transaction for this check, I'm going to see $500. But if I'm looking at a detailed transaction for this check, I'm seeing two lines, one for 200 and one for 500, one for 300, and I will not see the $500. And once I do some example, hopefully that will make sense. But if you can't get past this, you're going to have a very tough time creating custom reports. So this is the single most important piece in here. And if you don't understand it, put it in the comment section, and I would love to clarify that as well. Okay. That being said, let's move on to how that information actually applies to creating a custom report. So the other piece is when you create a custom detail report, you're going to have a filter called the detail level filter. The detail level filter allows you to pick whether or not you want to see the summary only, which in this case would be the source or the header, or you want to see the details only, which is the all except summary option that you see in the bottom piece. Or if you click all, it would essentially show you all debits and all credits. As I mentioned earlier, some summary information copies over to the detail, but generally not vice versa. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next slide. And this is a really important piece because in some cases, people like to have sort of like a cheat sheet to understand, okay, depending on the transaction, what is source and what's destination or what's detail. So you definitely should print this. You should have this handy when creating custom reports. Just know that if you're pulling a report that contains checks, the source would be the information tied to the bank, where the detail or the destination will be the expense category. If you're doing an invoice, for example, or a credit memo, the source would be accounts receivable, and then the detail would be the actual sales account tied to those items. If you're doing a journal entry, this is a tricky one. Journal entry, whatever the first line is of the journal entry, that would QuickBooks will consider that the source, and whatever second to 1,000, QuickBooks will consider that destination. So when you're pulling a report that contains journal entries, keep in mind that depending on whether you query both source and destination, you may get the information that you're looking for. So that being said, I would strongly suggest that if you are doing a journal entry, that you pick a bank account, accounts receivable, or accounts payable as the first line item. As a matter of fact, I would make sure that if the journal entry contains only one balance sheet account and the rest are P&L accounts, profit and loss accounts, you always make sure that the one balance sheet account becomes the first line of the journal entry. Okay. So Rich is asking, can I produce a report with these headers? Yes. So I'm going to show you that. So this slide shows the actual filter that we're going to be working on which is going to be the detail level filter. Okay. You're going to click on the filters tab on the right hand side. And most of the common filters that we use are detail level, date, account, name, class. But detail level is what we're going to focus in because that's really the most important exercise to custom reports. So let me go into the product here, go into QuickBooks. Okay, so I'm going to go into the reports menu. I'm going to click on custom reports and transaction detail. This is the most common report that I tend to produce. So we go to custom reports, transaction detail. Okay, and then the custom report box will open up, and this is where you choose your date range. So I'm going to pick, let's say, for example, this fiscal year. That will give me all the transactions for this year. And I am on the sample manufacturing file, by the way. If you want to follow along, maybe watch the recording later on, you can open the sample file for manufacturing in your QuickBooks for this. Then I'm going to click on filters here, and then I'm going to click on detail level. And I'm going to click on summary only. And then I'm going to click on filters again. I'm going to click on transaction type. And I'm going to click on accounts receivable. Okay. And sorry, not transaction type, on account. We're going to click on accounts receivable. So what we're essentially doing is we're creating a report that contains the header of all the invoices and credit memos, which is the transactions that affect accounts receivable, and we don't want to see any of the details from it. So once we click OK, essentially you're going to notice that we're going to see, and if you actually look at the invoice numbers, notice that every single invoice number is different. Okay, this is called a header report or a summary report of all the transactions that affect my accounts receivable. Now, I don't necessarily have to use accounts receivable at the filter. In this particular case, I wanted to have my credit memos and invoices both show up. If I click on Customize Report and I go back into Filters, and I don't choose accounts receivable, I'm actually going to choose all accounts. But then I'm going to click on transaction type, and then I'm going to click on invoice and hit OK. I'm going to get a very similar report. I mean, it's going to be very, very similar. The difference is credit memos won't show up in this particular case because we told it a specific transaction type that we wanted to see only, that we did not want to see anything else affecting accounts receivable. We just told it any invoices, but all invoices affect accounts receivable. That's really kind of the point. But now we get to the real tricky piece here, which is the split column. And this is the column that drives every single person that I know absolutely bonkers and insane, because it doesn't really explain really what's going on. And the problem is it's also inconsistent. Like, notice that the first transaction says split and the second transaction says revenue repair service. Okay. Why is this happening? The reason why this is happening is because this second invoice you see here, 71057, if I double click on that, that invoice only has one line. Therefore, when QuickBooks is writing, let's call it a journal entry for this transaction, it only has two lines to write to the accounting system. It has the source and the destination as a single line. Now, what I mean by writing debits and credits into the accounting system, anytime you have any transaction up in the screen like this, you can hit Control Y on your keyboard, Control Y, and it will take you to a report that will basically show you the debits and credits inside that transaction and the accounts being affected. So we see here, we have a debit to accounts receivable, and then we have a credit to repair and revenue service. So anytime that a transaction only contains a single line item, a source report, which is what you're seeing here, will show the split. But if there's more than one line item, and it obviously can't fit 100 or 2 or 3 line items in a single line, it would say the word hyphen, split hyphen, letting you know that it's not possible for it to report the other side of the transaction because there's multiple lines affecting it. I'm going to double click on that first invoice just so you can see there's multiple line items in there. So as long as there's multiple line items in any transaction, and you're looking at a report that's header only or summary only, you're never going to see information on the split side. You're just going to see that split word in it. Now, let me click on Customize Report, and I'm going to click on Filters. And then instead of doing summary only, I'm going to click on all except summary. So I just want you to kind of just focus on the fact that there's an invoice here, 71056, and I'm going to change it to all except summary. And what we're expecting to see is we're expecting to see, instead of that one summary line, we're expecting to see the 4 item level lines or the 4 split lines from that invoice. So I'm going to click OK. Actually, let's do one more thing here. I'm going to put here NUM number, and I'm going to focus or narrow down on just that transaction on 71056. That way we don't have any other distractions alongside of it. And that's also something you can do when you're building a report where you only want to look at a specific transaction, a specific number of transactions. You just put the number in there. So I'm going to put 71056, hit OK. And there it is. So now we have every single line item on this transaction. And as a matter of fact, it's actually more than 4. And that's another piece, a really important piece to understand about reporting. Anytime you use inventory parts, QuickBooks is going to hit 3 accounts in total. It's going to hit my sales account, and I'm going to click here to the right here. I'm going to click on Customize Report real quick, and then I'm going to click on Columns, and I'm going to type Account Type, because this will actually help you understand that better. So I'm going to click Account Type, and then I'm going to bring Account Type here to the right or to the left. So notice that every time there's inventory, you're going to see 3 accounts being hit. You're going to see an income account, you're going to see your inventory account, and then you're going to see your cost of goods sold. And that's an important piece. Sometimes you want to see that, sometimes you don't want to see that. At the end of the day, cost of goods sold and inventory will be the same amount, debit and credit. So you're not going to have any issues, adding up or summing that invoice, because that becomes pretty much a wash. But there are cases in which I don't want to see that. I may not want to see the cost of goods sold portion or the inventory asset portion. And we can actually, through reports, kind of clean that piece out. But let's not do that yet. We're going to get there in a second. But what you're seeing here essentially is you're seeing all the split level, all the line item levels. I'm going to click on Customize Report. I'm going to click on Filters. And then I'm going to click on Detail Level instead of All Except Summary. I'm going to click on All. So now I'm going to bring all the information, header and detail. And I'm going to click OK. And the only thing you're going to see difference is you're going to see on the top line, you're going to see now the debit, which is the overall dollar amount of the invoice, which is $34,500. You see that the account type being hit this time is accounts receivable. It's the only time you see it. And then under split, you see the word split, which is what you're expecting to do. And then you're going to see debits and credits all match up. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to necessarily show the debits and the credits that have to do with the inventory and cost of goods sold. So I can click on the Customize Report section. I can click on Filters. And then it says here, all accounts. But instead, what I can do is I want to show only accounts receivable as my source account. That contains a split that only contains all ordinary income. Okay, so we have all ordinary income. Okay, notice that you have a couple. You have all ordinary income and expense, all ordinary income expense, all cost of goods sold. You want to do all ordinary income and then hit OK. And then at this point, you're only going to see the income side of the transaction. Okay, so that's really up to you on how you want to see it. If I want to see just the income side, I want to see the cost of goods sold, the inventory piece. I want to see the debits and the credits. I mean, that's really up to you how you want to do it. Under this same theme, I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to click on Customize Report. I'm going to click on Filters. And then I'm going to click on all ordinary income and cost of goods sold. Okay, and then I'm going to hit OK. Okay, and the reason why I'm showing you this is because this would be my profit on the invoice. It's this information that you really can't get from QuickBooks anywhere. QuickBooks doesn't have an profit by invoice report. But by reading the balance amount on a report that, again, contains a filter in which shows income and cost of goods sold only, it doesn't show the inventory part of it and doesn't show the accounts receivable part of it. This will essentially be your profit by invoice. Okay, so that could be information that is useful. You could also do that just to kind of show you if you happen to be looking at the invoice at the moment and I want to say, what's my profit on this invoice? All you have to do is hit Control Y and then click on Customize Report, go to Filters, and then under Accounts, you're going to put all income / cost of goods sold. So you're going to click on all ordinary income / cost of goods sold, hit OK, and then make sure that under Customize Reports, we turn on a column called Balance. And we turn on Balance here on the column side and hit OK. And there would be the same, where's the balance here? That's the profit on that. At $13,000, that's the profit on that job. Okay, and that's obviously that profit is only based on the inventory parts, because non-inventory parts don't really carry any sort of profit information. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing with the same invoice, just because it'll provide some context. Okay, so I'm going to click on the edit menu. I'm going to click on find. Then I'm going to click on advanced. Then I'm going to click on number. And I'm gonna go look for that particular invoice number. And then I'm gonna search it in here, and I'm gonna show you with the search results, what do the search results show and how the information is organized to help you deepen this whole concept of, detail versus summary. So I'm gonna search the invoice number only. I'm gonna click on find, and I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna maximize the screen. And then what you're gonna see on the screen here, you're gonna find the search in which one line is a bold and then the other lines are not bold, if you notice that. And then you have some negatives, some positives, and then you actually have a bold and not bold. So when you're using the search screen, if you ever wondered what does it mean when one transaction is bold and the other one is not bold, well, basically the bold would be the summary of that transaction. So if I were to expand that range maybe to like 7,200 or 72,000, so we can see multiple invoices, notice that every time you see a transaction that is in bold and it contains the transaction number right on it, that's when the old transaction ends and the new transaction begins. And that bold is letting you know that that is the summary or the header of that transaction. So that becomes really useful. So if I were to click on detail level here on the advanced search screen, and I click summary only, and I'm using the same filters that I would use on a report, and click on find, notice that every transaction is bold. If I click on all except summary and click on find, you see every transaction is not bold. Okay, so that will help you strengthen the concept of summary versus detail. Okay, let's see. Let's hit escape. Okay, someone's saying, I love the custom transaction detail report. Is there a way to have a quick link to a blank one in the top menu bar? You actually can't. Let's go ahead and show you that. So if I go to reports, custom reports, transaction detail report, and I'll start with today, and then I'll remove all the filters. Okay, so there's no filters. The only thing that is there is today. And I maximize that. This would be essentially a today transaction detail report, which is actually probably the best way to get started with this type of report. So all we did in the customize is the only filter we have there is date today. So what you can do is you can memorize this report, and we can call it blank transaction detail report, something like that. Okay, and then this will be here under the reports, memorize reports, and I'll sit right here. Or what we can do is we can click on the view menu and wait until that loads. Okay, so I'm answering Maureen's question on taking a report and putting it on the top bar. So we can memorize it, that was one thing, or we can click on the view menu, and we can click on this little option here that says add blank transaction detail report to icon bar. Once I click on that, and I'll click OK, it adds it. It adds it to my icon bar. The problem is I have so many things in my icon bar that I have to click on this little drop-down menu to pull it. But once I click on customize icon bar, I can actually grab that transaction and I can click and drag it and bring it all the way to the top. And I'm going to put it here just to the right of home. And then I'll click OK. And there it is. You're going to see it right up there. Blank transaction detail report. You can right click, click on customize icon bar. You can go to it and click edit, and you can change the name. So let me change it to details. I don't know, something that would be smaller, that wouldn't take that much real estate. Hit OK, and then you see it up here. So every time you want to start with a quick transaction detail report real quick, you can just click on details, and boom, there you got your transaction blank with only today's date on it. Now, if I have a left icon bar, not the top icon bar, that's also going to sit here under, right there under home. So it will give you the same effect whether you have a left icon bar or a right icon bar. Okay, perfect. Okay, so that's a transaction detail report. Trust me, I got 2 to 3 more hours of content that I can cover on this, but I wanted to cover the summary report as well because that's also a really important component of custom reports. Oh wait, actually, I have a question here. Marianne is saying, how can I see the invoice date and the pay date in the same report? So Marianne, unfortunately, that cannot happen. QuickBooks will either show you the pay date or the invoice date. It will not show you both. Unfortunately, that's a restriction that QuickBooks has. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let me go to details and let me go to customize report. Let me go to filters and then I'll click on transaction type and I'll click on invoice and I'll hit OK. That date that you see here, right there says 12/15/2022. That is the invoice date. That's the actual invoice date. If I switch this report from accrual to cash, this will now show you the payment date. So let's narrow this down to one invoice here. So let's go here to number. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to answer that question in detail, although I don't have a really smart answer for it. But so we have one invoice here, which is the invoice 71081. I'm going to bring this back, let's say to the beginning of the month, for example. And I'm kind of gonna play with the payment date so you can actually see how the date gets modified whenever we have payments involved. Okay, so this invoice date is actually 12/15/2022. If I receive the payment for that invoice, I'm gonna go to customers, receive payment, and that's for retail homeowner. And that's, let's say, 9,300. And I'll apply it. And I'm going to date the payment itself to the 7th. Actually, let me date that to the 23rd. That'll make it easier. Okay, so let's bring this all the way to the 23rd. Okay. So on an accrual-based report, this would be on 12/15/2022. And then where's my payment? Let me go search that payment real quick. Make sure that I did apply it to the correct job. Okay, there's my payment. Let me apply it. And that was G of Hicks. So let me apply it to the job. Hit save and close. Perfect. So if I'm pulling an accrual-based report, QuickBooks is going to give me the original invoice date. But if I switch this to cash, QuickBooks is going to give me the, let me see, was this a partially paid? No, that's it. So QuickBooks is going to give me the payment date, as you see here on the bottom. So, so that's kind of the challenge that you'll have, that accrual basis reports will always show you the report as a function, the transaction as a function of original transaction date, and the cash-based report will show you the report as a function of the actual payment date. Now, there are some items here that must be at zero quantity, which may be causing, the reason why it's showing like there's two different transactions there. But that's really the difference. So there's no way, there's no field here for like pay date, although there's this field here called pay date. That's actually not for invoices. Like you'll bring that in there and it'll be completely blank. That's for paychecks only. So that's the issue that most people have, is that they start by doing this and they're expecting that pay date tab to bring you the pay date. Just QuickBooks doesn't do that. It will either show you the original invoice date or it will show you the payment date, but it won't do both. And that's really a function on whether you use summary or detail type of reports. I'm going to give you access to some resources that I have. I want to make sure you have access to them. So I have this questionnaire that I have here. This is called my QuickBooks Online versus Pro Premier versus Enterprise questionnaire. This is a set of about 25 questions that I ask all my clients anytime that I'm there to choose whether or not they're going to go with QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop. I ask all these questions, right? So if you like this questionnaire, if this is the type of work that you do, where you're helping your client decide whether you should go with Enterprise, Accountant, Pro, Premier, online, whatever. These are the basic questions I ask over the phone or via email, and that would allow me to pretty much know what I'm going to recommend. Then I take those answers and I compare them against my matrix spreadsheet. I think the link for the matrix for this one that I'm showing you now, that link is on the slides. That one is actually there, but the questionnaire is not. I kind of just remember last minute that I had that. I didn't upload that anywhere, so just email me, Hector at Garcia CPA, if you want the questionnaire itself. But this matrix is then basically compares about 120, 130 features across the board, 147 features across the board, QuickBooks Essentials plus Enterprise and Pro Premier. And I basically indicate whether it has the feature, it doesn't have the feature, whether it's limited. In some cases, there are some notes in terms of what it can do with that capacity. So that allows me to take the questionnaire, the answers from the questionnaire, go through this matrix, and just really, really quickly let the client know, yep, QuickBooks Online will be good for you. QuickBooks Enterprise, QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Premier will be good for you. And I'm updating this all the time. I created this about 3 years ago, and last updated it was September of last year. So I'm always adding updates to that. So this particular, if the questionnaire you want, just email me and I get that for you. And then the matrix it's part of the slides. And then let me see, what else do I have here? Let me just make sure I don't miss anything. If you go to my YouTube channel, just search Hector Garcia CPA. I have a lot of videos on reporting, and on the slides, there's one particular slide that where is it? Okay, there's this slide here that contains 3 videos. They're about an hour long each. Actually, the polling question is still up. So as soon as that,
we can close that poll. We have about 90% response. We'll just close. And Hector, back to you.
Sure. So on the slides, and make sure you download the slides. There's 3 videos that I handpicked for this session to be sort of like the follow-up videos that will help you build on it. That's about 3 more hours, about say 2.5 more hours worth of video. So a lot of this stuff is available already online. I also have a custom report cheat sheet. Nathan, give me a chance. I want to cover this one because actually this one's actually really powerful. There's another cheat sheet I created that I've been updating, which basically tells you every field inside QuickBooks: customer, job, customer type, vendor type, employee. I built this. This was built internally in our office. This was actually kind of our edge. We're building custom reports that we had this, and you see every single field that's in here. So when a customer comes to you and says, "Can you build me a report that has this in the column, this in the header, this in the detail, this in the rows, this in that sort of thing," you can go through here and say, well, yeah, actually that field, it's available as a filter, but it's not available as a column. This field is available as a field, but not available as it is available on the filters, or it's not available on the filters. So once you start building custom reports, trust me, this particular sheet is priceless. I mean, it took me years to build this, making this available, and all this stuff, it's in the slides. But any of it that you didn't get, just email me. It's Hector at GarciaCPA.com. All those resources, I have them like literally on my desktop. I can attach them into an email real quick and make them available for you. Really long term, I would love for folks that are working with Enterprise, recommending their clients to QuickBooks, to work with me to purchase it. And I am a reseller. Obviously, I get commission from Intuit for selling the software, and I do share it with my partners. So if you want to, sell to your clients and get some commission, great. If you want to sell to your clients and pass the savings on to them, let me know, and I won't send you the commission check. I'll send it to the client instead. So email me if you have report questions, QuickBooks questions, anything with Enterprise. You're trying to figure out if it's the right fit for your client. I'm usually very much available via email.